including especially climate change with CO2, so that you can change your lifestyle, right? So we left off with this, right? Talking about the Royal Society released its report calling for more death, and Paul Ehrlich, who calls for basically forced sterilization, forced abortions, drugging the water supply. He says what? The population resources multiply together. You have to deal with them together. We have too much consumption among the rich and too little among the poor. So that sounds very empathetic, right? Altruistic. That implies that terrible thing that we are going to have to do, which somehow redistribute access to resources away from the rich and to the poor. So, man, that's interesting, because remember, we know based off one of the IPCC panel members actually admits that climate change, the whole scheme, plan, goal of climate change is what? To redistribute wealth. That's what it's for. The only problem is it's not going to be done voluntarily. It's not going to be done without violence, without the threat of the gun, right? And he gives a little scenario saying that 4 or 5 billion people might be sustainable in the long term if we're basically living in these little micro cities that they're talking about, mega cities or smart cities, right? It says we have to humanely and as rapidly as possible move to population shrinkage or reduction. And it's pretty crazy, because he goes in there talking about can you go over the top without a disaster like a worldwide plague? And he actually uses these viruses like the bird flu and that have been engineered to leap to humans and from animals and stuff like that for eugenics, and he uses that as an example. Catastrophic disasters, because the more people you have, the greater chance of some weird virus, he's talking about an engineered virus by the eugenicists, transferring from animal to human populations. There could be vast die-off. So in other words, that would be a good thing. And finishing up, says what the Royal Society terms systematically decoupling economic activity from environmental impact is actually a rephrasing of Agenda 21's plan to gradually deindustrialize the West, as well as the creation of megacities in which the bulk of the world's population could be locked up to make them more manageable, or what the Royal Society calls the potential for urbanization to reduce material consumption. And that's what greening and CO2 is all about. According to an MSNBC article, one of the scientists, while speaking about human population worldwide, said, "We certainly don't want them strolling," he's talking about the slaves, "them strolling about the entire countryside. We want them to save land for nature," i.e. for them, right? By living closely together. So they want the slaves that are in the cities so they can be more easily managed, and then the elites get their own countryside with their organic foods and produce and meats. And of course they will be highly protected and secure. And it says here, in addition, the professor says, ending human population growth is almost certainly a necessary but not sufficient condition for preventing catastrophic global climate change. Reducing current human numbers may be necessary in order to do so. So there's many that will say, I agree with it, there's too many people. Well, my answer to them is you're not going to create a law, or I don't agree with you creating a law, putting a gun in my face, telling me what I can and cannot eat or put in my body or grow or something like that. And, if you care so much about it, if you're so altruistic, then you can put the gun to your head, turn that same gun that you're pointing at other people to force them to do something you want, and point it towards yourself and pull the trigger, right? Like South Park. Go ahead, put the gun to your temple, pull the trigger, and blow your fucking head off. And then you know what? Now we won't have to deal with you anymore. Then you can reduce the world's population. But until then, after-birth abortions, eugenicists are saying babies are a parasitic burden on society in a paper published in the Journal of Medical Ethics. When circumstances occur after birth such that they would have justified abortion, what we call after-birth abortion should be permissible. We propose to call this practice after-birth abortion rather than infanticide. I can never pronounce that, but I think we know what it is. It's killing babies after they're out of the womb. It says here to emphasize that the moral status of the individual killed is comparable with that of a fetus rather than that of a child. This is so crazy, though, because it says here, we claim that killing a newborn could be ethically permissible in all the circumstances where abortion would be. Such circumstances include cases where the newborn has a potential to have an at least acceptable life. And this is what they're doing, but the well-being of the family at risk. They're already doing this with genetic screening to And eventually, I think it's in Scotland, and that where they're looking for people that are, quote, drug addicts or prone to be violent. Those are the two ones that they look for. And say what you will, people have a right to go through their lives and determine their own fate and not be squashed before they even have a chance. But eventually, the screening will be permanent. It will be mandatory, and those that do not have acceptable traits, as they say, they will not be able to come into this world. And those that are even born into this world could still be put down in the name of it being ethically permissible. And I didn't joke about it, but I mentioned this a couple months ago about how they call it out-of-womb abortions, out-of-womb abortion. So it's probably been around for a long time, but either way, they're pushing this forward. Out-of-womb abortions, after-birth abortions. Do I want to put a gun to your head and tell you can't do it? No, go ahead, do it. So there is a reason why the government's in the business, because they carry out eugenics as well. State funding of abortion under Medicaid says here, state policies in brief as of August 1st, 2012. So it was first implemented in 1977, the Hyde Amendment. But as of right now, it says that most do as a result of a specific court order. So certain ones are paid for and certain ones are not paid for. Should the government pay for birth control? Canadian doctors, eugenicists, think so. So the issue of government funding for contraception has been fueled fierce ideological debate. It says recently with our friends south of the border, yet here in Canada it appears our own debate is stirring. And the carbon tax, silence, overtaken by events, so you don't hear much or expect to hear much about climate change at the Republican Democratic conventions. There'll be plenty of speeches of unemployment, but the threats posed by global warming are decades away, or so we have been told in recent years. So it says here climate alarmists are now pointing to evidence linking rising global temperatures to the extreme weather we're seeing around the planet. So this is the New York Times basically what? Promoting enacting a steep carbon tax up to $80 per metric ton of emissions. It says here would eventually result in climate stability. And they're actually saying it would help balance future budgets. It says we need substantial additional revenue. Of course, a carbon tax is a solution to climate change. This is from Forbes, going off the New York Times. From August 16th, data from leading IPCC scientists show global temperatures have dropped unprecedented 1 degree Celsius since 1990. If you ask renowned scientists from this panel what the mean global temperature is today, they would tell you it's about 14.5 degrees Celsius. If you ask them what it was 20 years ago, you'd expect to have the answer to be about 14. Surprisingly, their literature from 20 years ago tells us unanimously that in 1990 the global temperature was 15 degrees Celsius, 1 degree Celsius more than today. You can look at their own charts below. It says here's a German government chart based in whatever global temperature in 91, 15.5. 1988, Der Spiegel reported a global mean temperature of 15.5 degrees, along in 1992. So 15.5 appeared to be the consensus among the scientific community. But now these scientists from the IPCC are telling us that the current mean global temperature is 14.5. There you go, in a presentation in Hamburg, it confirmed the current global mean temperature is 14.5, along with the fourth assessment in 2004 of 14.5. So finishing up at that rate of cooling, it says here, calling 15.5 in 1990 to 14.5 in 2010 will be deep into an ice age by the end of the century. And that's personally what I think is going to happen. So it says here, an Arctic Peninsula warming, unusual but not unique. A new research conducted by the British Antarctic Survey suggests that the recent temperature rise and ice loss are not unprecedented. According to the report, it says here, although the peninsula is warming rapidly, it previously based in temperature slightly higher than today. Studies show the peninsula experienced significant warming 15 to 12,000 years ago, becoming about 1 degree centigrade warmer than today. So they always want